This is the Authority Company Podcast, conversations with leaders that are designing our future. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and we all know that business is hard, startups are hard, fundraising is hard, the 9-to-5 is hard, but you know what also is hard? Life. Life can be really hard, especially when we lose a loved one, and that's the subject of Kathryn Henry's book, A Dime to Say I Love You, a journey of love, loss, and spiritual awakening. Kathryn has held numerous executive positions at major brands, but she's not just a business leader, she's a spiritual seeker who's inspired to write this book after losing her wife after a long battle with cancer. We're going to talk about dealing with grief, her philosophy known as another Frickin Growth Opportunity, and explore the enduring power of love, which serves as a reminder that even in the darkest of grief, light can be found. Kathryn, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm fabulous. Thank you, Joe, and thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm glad you're fabulous this time of day. I really appreciate it. And, you know, for whatever reason, Kathryn, since I'm a Gen Xer, I tie everything to popular culture. And, you know, the subject matter of your book and what you write about, I immediately, when I started reading your book and reading into you, was like 6 feet under. I don't know if you remember 6 feet under many, many years ago. But the reason I bring it up is for folks who are not familiar with the show, it's this amazing TV series from like the early 2000s about a couple of brothers that run a funeral home. And there was this great scene in episode 1 where one of the brothers who had never been in any kind of funeral services, he basically just he inherited the company and was like, okay, now I got to figure this out. But at one point, he's trying to comfort a woman who had lost a loved one. And she asks him, why do people die? And he had this quote that like still sticks with me to this day. And it's like, and he said, to make life important. Because none of us know how long we've got, which is why we have to make each day matter. And that line just resonates with me because I think for many, the idea of why do people die, obviously when you're younger and you have trouble grasping the concept of it, it's hard. But even as you get older, you're like, why does this happen? When this question comes to you, why do people die? What do you think? And how do you answer that after everything you've been through?
It's a really great way to contextualize it. Why do people die? And it does bring significant meaning when we can go into the place of acknowledging we're going to die. A lot of times in the West, we just don't want to think about death. In the East, it's like an active practice in many places. So, you know, why do people die? I mean, I think that's like the $1 million question, right? Everybody would love to know, what is the purpose of life? What's the meaning of life? Why do we live? Why do we die? In my existence, in my world, you know, it's just the flip side of the coin of life. You know, life comes with death. There are only a few things in life that are guaranteed, and one of which is death. So the sooner we can like just get in relation with that and live more fully, and also understand that the things we do here are things that can bring us so much joy, so much love, so much gratitude, but they're all going to be left behind. So enjoy them while you've got them, you know, enjoy what we have with each other and know that, you know, tomorrow may not come.
Yeah, it's funny how as younger people, you don't even think, you think you have this unlimited runway of like, and I think we do this as humans, no matter what culture, like, I'll leave for tomorrow. I'll do that tomorrow. I'll push it off until next week. And then once you get older, you're like, holy crap, I don't have a lot of tomorrows left. I gotta take advantage while I can. So one of the things that, you know, I hope people learn from whether our conversation or reading your book is just like the importance of living in the now and loving the people that are in your sphere. And, you know, that leads us to you writing the book. And for many people, they know you, you know, a very, very successful executive working for major brands like Gap, Levi Strauss, and Lululemon. But you didn't write a business book. You wrote a book about love and loss. So let's start there in terms of, you know, you could have probably written a business book if you really wanted to, but you decided not to. Tell me why this was the book. And obviously, you know, we're going to get into the story about it, but why was it so important for you to write this book now?
You know, when I think about business and personal life, they aren't separate. They just are not separate. So one could consider this as much a business book as it is a book on life and loss and living. It's about living life fully. It's about taking all of the opportunities that we get in life and living into them. So in business, you know, I was fortunate enough to be with a company, Lululemon, when things became pretty dire with Lisa and with the diagnosis. I was actually able to leave. to leave on great terms. The company was just wonderful to me, and ultimately, I even came back to the company in a whole nother role. Um, but life happens when we're working. Tragedy happens, sickness happens, health happens, joy happens. So they aren't to me any different. But why did I write this book now instead of a business book? Because life for me, it was sharing some lessons. Really, Lisa and I both wished we would have had earlier in life that would have made our lives more enjoyable and probably prevented a few face plants along the way. If I could have told some of these things to my 20-year-old self, my 15-year-old self, even my 40-year-old self, um, I would have been grateful. I mean, some lessons we have to learn, by experiencing them. But I wanted to share just some of the things because the experience that we went through, sometimes people don't experience things like that until much later in life. So it was an opportunity to just say, I'm going to share this. And if it helps one person to shift anything about how they embrace life, and how they deal with when tragedy strikes, because it will. It's inevitable. It will. Then it's worth sharing.
That's great. And now let's talk about some of the good times before we get into the rough stuff. So you lost your wife, Lisa. How did you guys meet? What was that relationship like early on? And then we'll obviously get to the heavy stuff. But let's go way back in the beginning of your relationship.
We were just friends. We met on a golf vacation, and we were both on trips to Sedona for a golf vacation. We lived in the Bay Area. We realized we lived close to each other, and both of us were in relationships with others. And for years we were just friends. We were good friends, and never would have thought that this person would end up being my wife or someone that I'd have an intimate relationship with. Um, yeah, so that's how it started, which was a wonderful foundation. And we were very, very different. So, probably not folks you would peg as expected to end up in a relationship together.
Tell me about this relationship in terms of like, when did you realize it was serious? Because I think we all get into, I think this happens at any kind of relationship where you're like, is this real? Is this something we're just doing for fun? Like, how long did it take before you realized that something with Lisa was something more than just like friends that kind of developed into something a little more?
It was years, literally,
Really?
it was years. We were both on our fast track with our corporate careers. We would connect, we would play golf, we would have times where we'd coach, give each other coaching when things were challenging. But there came times where things in life became like really questioning what role our jobs have in our lives, what role, how we want to engage in a relationship, like what kind of relationship do we want to have? Um, we were both very strong, kind of, I would say alpha, if you will, or A type kind of personalities, and the type to just like run everything. We don't need help. We don't need anybody. We can run everything. But then there was kind of like these conversations where we'd realize, wow, maybe, maybe that's not all of who I am. And after a number of years and some tough circumstances where we just kind of coached each other through living fully into like the things we dreamed about in life. For her, that was returning to track and field. There wasn't any money in it. But she really, really wanted to coach. She wanted to train again. She wanted to compete again. And I sat across and I was like, well, just go for it. Why don't you just go do it? You don't have to have this super high power career. You can go be a coach. You can do something that feeds your soul, feeds your heart. And she supported me in that way too. And through some major changes in life, we kind of saw each other and we're like, maybe this is more than just a friendship.
Wow. Who was the one that realized it first that it was more than a friendship? Did someone have to call it out to be like, oh, you know what? Maybe this is more. Maybe there's something more to what we have right now.
It was I'll just without going into detail, I'll just say that it was a special moment that we had between the two of us where,
Okay.
yeah, where I just acknowledged to her that I thought she was beautiful. She didn't think she was beautiful. She had kind of grown up as a kid, tall and gangly and not self-conscious, but just kind of wasn't the pretty one in the room, and I made a comment to her, "I think you're absolutely beautiful." She was stunning. And it was kinda in that moment that we just looked at each other and realized that there's something more here. So it wasn't really so much anything said, but just more, the depth of connection, that was there.
That's great. That's great. Thank you very much for sharing that. And then, which leads us to her being diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer. And I'm sure someone, obviously, you described who's athletic and very fit, and then something like this happens. Um, take us to that moment when you both found out, and then realized that at that, we talked about the life's too short, where life became short really fast.
Well, the funny thing is she was training to compete in Lahti, Finland in the World Masters track and field, and she developed a lump in her groin. The femoral plexus, and we were just, like, at that point, like jocks. We were both personal trainers, we had left our careers, our, executive roles, and, we thought, "Oh, she's been overtraining because of a foot injury, so maybe it's a developed sartorius." And we flew, she competed, she was in a lot of pain on the airplane. We got trainers in Lati that were able to help her out a little bit, but we're using a foam roller to try to roll out this, what we think is a knot or
Right.
a muscle issue.
The personal trainer's
And,
ultimate tool, right? Get the foam roller out. That'll
yeah,
fix
it's
everything.
just you just roll it out, man, it'll be fine, just roll it out. And she actually finished 3rd in the world throwing the javelin. She
Wow.
did great throwing the shot put. She was a multi-eventer, heptathlon, pentathlon. She couldn't do the whole event because of the injury. Um, but when we got home, we were like, it wasn't getting any better. So we went, she saw a doctor, and we pretty much knew immediately when the doctor was like, yeah, we need to do a biopsy. This is not good. And within a couple of weeks, we got back the results, and the specific cancer was identified, and yeah, life just changed. It was like, and I've heard this too. It happened with cancer had run in her family. One of her cousins, like literally, had just was top notch, like professional volleyball player, and she just went face planted one day and had leukemia. And it was I have heard that sometimes folks who are in really top notch physical condition can get to a late stage cancer sometimes without detecting it, because maybe perhaps they're so used to just working through the pain and just like, hey, it is what it is. I'm just gonna muscle through it. When our body's trying to tell us, maybe give us warning signs we don't know. So it was, yeah, it was a game changer, you know?
Wow. Uh, just to share, my father passed away from Huntington's disease after a 10-year-long battle. And I remember when he was going through it, I was sort of like in my late 20s, early 30s. And it was really hard for me to see my father like that. Because folks not familiar with Huntington's disease, imagine it's like ALS, where essentially you become a prisoner of your own body. And to see my father going from an immigrant who'd come here with nothing, worked his way up, became blue collar, worked blue collar jobs whole life, would come home sweaty and dirty every day of his life. Uh, Always like had muscles without having to work out, and then I got to see that deterioration of just like him just losing basically all functions of his body. And it was really hard for me. And selfishly, I kind of pulled back a little bit because I couldn't be there, because I couldn't, like, my brain at that point, I was not self-aware enough to realize how important it would be for me to be there. But to me, it was just like almost like a fight or flight. Like, I can't see this because this is like soul crushing to me. Unfortunately, if a lot of it fell on to my mother to handle him. She was working a full-time job, but also being like a part-time caregiver for him. Um, so I just that's one of my regrets in my life, is just not being there more for my father. But this was your partner, and we've heard stories of partners leaving other partners because again, like me, selfishly could not handle it. But tell me about your situation in terms of what you were going through, and it, just from reading and knowing more about you, I don't think there was any doubt in your mind that you were going to stick through it to the end. But what were those early feelings like, of like, oh my God, this is for the next X number of months or years, this is going to be my life. What were you struggling with at that time?
Well, first, sorry for your loss.
Thank
It's always difficult to lose anyone, and our parents, it's typically something we know we're gonna lose, but, early in life, that's just really tough because it's the time in life where all of a sudden you realize you're orphaned. It's
Yeah.
like, "I'm an orphan now," and whether you're 20 years old or 60 years old, that's a hard thing for us to deal with, so, I hope you've worked through those regrets because living life with regrets, usually holding on to regret just means that we haven't yet processed it into the life lesson that it is. And regrets just don't do us really any good. But the lesson from the things that cause that actually does. So, what was I going through? This was part of the transformation because I watched this person who was the most powerful, strong, physically strong person, um, who lived life, experienced life really through physicality, and would say through the process, like, I don't know if I can do this because if I lose my physical capability, how am I going to engage in the world? Like, I don't find joy in. She was dyslexic. She was brilliant, but was dyslexic. And so, sitting down reading a book was not something that worked for her. And she wasn't one to sit in front of the TV either. It was get out and do something. It was, we found joy in physically doing things. But we were both at a stage in our lives where, just it deepened. We got some good counseling. We worked with a grief counselor that specialized in death and dying. But what emerged was seeing this strength, um, and seeing strength as a whole 'nother thing. So it had been strength was about, how much can you lift? How fast can you run? These kinds of things. And then all of a sudden I saw this woman emerge that was just incredibly strong mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and it was rocky. I'm not gonna paint a picture that it was perfect and easy. It was very, very difficult, and there were moments where, we both had to go our separate ways because we just couldn't handle it. And what I mean by that is like, I'm leaving the room,
Right.
not I'm moving or leaving, but we were committed to the journey together. And to your point though, that watching someone lose their physicality or just like with Alzheimer's or some other of these diseases that we have, where we lose our mental capacity, you know, we don't get to choose how we're going to go out of this world. I mean, some people do, and it's unfortunate. I mean, that was something I faced at a young age. And in our world now, we have people that are choosing to take their lives. Um, that's 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 a tough one, a really tough one. But we don't get to choose what life circumstances we're gonna be in for the most part. We have choice of who we're gonna be in life, and we can affect a lot of things, but things happen that are outside of our control, and how we die often is something outside of our control.
Yeah.
It's not.
When my father passed away, I remember I didn't cry. I was very pragmatic. I've always been very pragmatic, and it was one of those things where it was like, after him battling this disease for 10 years, I was like, please go. I mean, you've hung on long enough. Don't hold on for us. Don't hold on for mom. Please go. And recently, I know you may laugh at this, but recently my dog had a little health scare, and I don't think I've ever cried as much in my life, Kathryn.
Mm.
I was like a wreck. I was like one of those, like, when you get the dry heaves of crying. And my wife, just coincidentally just brought it up. She's like, I didn't see you cry when your father passed, but you're crying that our dog is fighting something. Luckily, he's better now, thankfully. But it's one of those things where I guess, in terms of like how you handle like grief and like in a way, what box you put it in. Like, to me, that grief was like, it's a let go grief because he was already he suffered way too much and didn't want to. You saw that firsthand. What were those last moments like for you in terms of like just it was such an aggressive form of cancer. It just completely transformed the person that she was. What were those grief moments like for you? Did you have sort of those similar feelings of mine of like, please go because you can't continue like this anymore? Or was it just like, no, please don't go? What were your struggles like?
All of the above.
Yeah.
It was nearly a 10-year battle as well. So she beat a lot of odds, and we had a lot of good times along the way. When it got down towards the end and the last of 5 major surgeries that she had, um, this was a surgery where she coded in intensive care, and I was so glad she didn't transition then. She ended up going really, I'd say, on her terms. Um, she was the one who was ready to go at times. She was like, I don't know if I can do this." She didn't want to go, but living became more and more difficult. Um, but equally, she wanted to live, and it's kinda if you've had a pet where you have to make the decision to let them go, it can be the toughest thing because one day they can just be, "Oh, okay, they're great. They're eating, they're walking, they're doing great." And then the next day they aren't. Um, and our pets can be an even more difficult loss because that's typically a source of where we actually experience unconditional love. It's very different with people. It's not often that we experience a relationship with people where we get to that place of sharing unconditional love. But with our pets, and our dogs in particular, that is one of the reasons it makes it such a difficult thing to face their loss. But going back to Lisa, I would say no, there was never a moment where I was like, "Just go, just go." There were a few moments where she said that, where she was like, I can't," was in a place of anger and frustration, like, I can't do this anymore. I wish, yeah, I know, I wish I could just go." But then that would pass as well. And when she did transition, it was an incredibly peaceful moment. Um, and it was strangely something I hadn't really contemplated. I mean, I should have been present to, she was in hospice care in our home for a few weeks, but that just wasn't really thing that entered in. Um, Certainly not just go. I guess when I will really reflect, there were moments where she was in pain that I knew she'd be better off when she went, but I just could never bring myself to wanting, uh, you know, and that's probably the selfish side of things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you again for sharing that, and that led you to write this book, and you talk about a dime to say I love you is the book, but you talk about dime moments. So for folks not familiar with that term, what are dime moments?
So what those came to be for me, so Lisa would leave me dimes. We would leave them for each other, and it was just a little token to say, just go hide one someplace. So when you find a dime, it's a dime to say I love you. Um, when she transitioned, the first night when I turned over, there was a dime on my pillow, on her pillow. And it was an incredibly profound moment that just took me from just a place of despair and sorrow and what the hell do I do now? Just like, what? It was just so weird to have the physical presence of her just gone. When they took the body away was probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, was allowing them um to take her body. Um I wanted to care for it somehow, through its transition. So that was dime number 1 after she transitioned, and then from there, there were multiple moments where I'd be in, places of just maybe lost, maybe not present, maybe swirling, and then there I'd find a dime, and it would just bring me right back. And then that evolved into moments where things would happen, and they weren't a physical dime, but they were moments in time where it's almost like, you see a comedy show or something where someone's hysterical and they slap them in the face and they just stop right where they are and catch themselves and say, "Okay, I need to I need to come out of my hysterics or whatever wherever I am that's not present and get back to grounded." So to me, that's what a dime moment is. A dime moment is when, you're spinning, you're swirling, and life gives you an opportunity to just stop in that moment and come back to present and say, "Okay, let me catch myself here. Let me come back to my center." Maybe it's a moment of anger, maybe it's a moment of fear, maybe it's a moment of, frustration. That's what those die moments are, that get back to touching us at our heart center or at our soul and say, check back in, come back to present.
That's great. And we joked earlier about the fact that you could have written a business book, but you wrote this book. But like most business books, there's always acronyms, and you could not resist having a good acronym in your book. You have AFGO, which is another freaking growth opportunity. So you didn't write a business book; you just could not avoid. It was just in your blood that you had to have some
There
sort
has to be some acronyms.
So tell me about AFGO.
Lisa and I started using that. It was just, things were happening, and it was just, at some point you need to laugh when you feel like you're just getting crap piled on top of you and more stuff. It's like, why is this happening? And we got to a point where we'd look at each other and we'd go, AFGO. And we didn't clean it up always, and sometimes we were pretty, pretty intense with how we'd talk about them. But it also gave us a way to kind of laugh a little bit in the face of, this is just another freaking growth opportunity. So let's figure out how we're gonna get through it. And it helped. It helped a lot because it gave us space to laugh. It gave us space to recontextualize things, to not be as personally, held by things that were happening, and to see them, which, it's really what life is for us. Life is bringing us lots of growth opportunities. We get to meet people, we get to connect with people, we get to have experiences. Some of them we would call pleasant, some of them we would call unpleasant. Those are just our judgments that we placed on them because that they're not the way we want them. For somebody, our unpleasant is maybe their pleasant, and that's not necessarily a good thing, but it's true. So those judgments we put on things, instead of doing that, we decided to call them AFGOs, because then you're not saying this really sucks or this is really cool. It's like, oh, another freaking growth opportunity. And
No,
it helped.
that's awesome. It's funny how, one of the things I always like to say, Kathryn, is like we can't change as humans, but I think we're all sort of like human iPhones. We could always upgrade our software and be better at things, whether it's being better at self-awareness, being better at handling regret, if it was criticism, self-confidence. We could all do that. Like there's little improvements. As we get older, the old dog's new tricks thing can apply sometimes when you're learning some. That's why I think
Yeah.
you should avoid learning something incredibly new. Just learn something that's tangentially new, because it's easier for us to sort of adapt that way. And so, you call yourself a spiritual seeker. And Kathryn, I bring this up to a lot of folks because obviously these are business podcasts, but there are always a lot of, business leaders that, that will wear their religion on their sleeve, whether it's, it's a part of the mission statement of their company, or just their own personal mission statement of how faith, balances with their religion. And their day job. And you mentioned earlier about the fact that life and business are very much intertwined, which I think younger generations are doing a better job of separating those two. But Kathryn, us old dogs, we have trouble separating life and work. But one of the questions I always ask to entrepreneurs or leaders that have a strong religious faith is, I went to Catholic school. I don't remember any parts of the Bible that mention how Jesus would fire somebody, like, or lay off 10,000 employees. So how do you, how do you intertwine the values of business and the values of faith? Because sometimes those two things do not mix. So now as you go forward, how do you think this spiritual journey transforms the way you will be in your normal sort of, whether it's your business life, whether it's professional, whether it's during your thought leadership journey? How do you think this is going to change you?
I don't think it does change me. It's just who I am. And the work, when I got into, especially I'd say Lululemon, a powerful culture, a culture of performance, high performance, which is all about finding your personal best, like being the best you could be. To me, that is the spiritual journey. The spiritual journey is, I believe we're born perfect. And then throughout our life, we have things that are piled on top of us. They're beliefs, they're self-limiting beliefs, they're self-aggrandizing beliefs, they're whatever they may be. Our journey, our spiritual journey, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. In my world, that's how I look at it. So it's not about religion. Religion is a construct. religion is a vehicle. It's a business, really. It's the business around whether it's Jesus's teaching or the Buddha's teachings or go down the list. But at the core of all of those religions, I believe there's a common, beautiful spiritual world. Each of us are spiritual beings. So the journey and why I call it a spiritual seeker is how do I uncover the full potential of that which exists within? And, I think all of us want that. We may have different language for it. Um, but there is no change into as who I am. You show up in the world who you are. Who you're being today is what you're going to become tomorrow. So this idea that we can't change is nonsense. It's just we are changing. We're changing on a daily basis, on a cellular level. Everything about us is changing every single day. So our attitudes, our choices, our thoughts, once we get control of our mind, we can indeed change. And that's really what this book is about, is help maybe giving some learnings around how we can gain more providence over ourselves, over our choices, over our lives, and be more intentional about how we want to be in the world.
Hmm. And before you got to writing the book, you really got into journaling. And it's funny, you're the second guest within the last 6 months I've had on a podcast talk about how much journaling affected their life. And I've always had this trouble trying to journal. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I'm always opening my mouth and I'm journaling out loud. But tell me about the power of journaling, and I guess in a way sort of led you into writing this book, right?
Well, I don't know if journaling led me into writing the book as much as, frankly, it was a necessity when Lisa transitioned. It was my outlet to write to her. That's really what it was. And I'm not someone who's had a diary or a journal, but interestingly, Lisa left me her journals from childhood and gave me permission to read them. And it was really such a beautiful, almost cathartic kind of experience to go through and read about things that I'd heard her tell me. But now I'm reading in her journal, things that happened when she was, competing at 14 years old in Russia, representing the United States of America as a pentathlete, and so many other things. So I think journaling is a great thing. In my personal experience, like you, Joe, in many ways, I was not good at journaling because I don't want to put my feelings down on paper, but I had to when it came to, and I won't say I had to, but I chose to as a vehicle to really help me through, especially the immediate few, years of after her transition. And now I do probably a lot more well, not probably, I do a lot more meditation than journaling. And I still do journal at times, but they're just vehicles for expressing ourselves. How is it that we acknowledge and understand and face our emotions, our thoughts? Sometimes these things, when we don't acknowledge them, they take on a much bigger life than they need to have. So journaling for me was a way to not allow that grief, that sorrow, that sadness to consume me, but instead to get it out on paper and to be a way to communicate things that needed to get out.
And at least, Kathryn, I normally wrap up these conversations taking folks behind the dedication of the book. And obviously, you dedicate the book to Lisa, but the one sentence of dedication, you say, "I carry your light with me always and hopes this work will bring an abundance of light and inspiration to all its readers." Just in closing, tell me about Lisa's light and what it is that has withstood this test of time, the struggles she went through it, and now after she's transitioned. Talk about Lisa's light.
Well, when she entered a room, everyone knew. She just was a source of strength, a source of light, had one of the best, personalities, and just was the most hilarious person I think I've known, yet equally serious, which was a very interesting combination. So the way that carries through is, sometimes in difficult times, I'll just feel an energy of strength. I'll feel a hand on my shoulder. It's just it's just this energy, that this love that innervates us all. It does connect us all. We all are connected. There is a source of energy that connects us all. And when we tap into that, it can enrich us and it can nourish us. And so I get that from her. I can feel that sense of energy. Sometimes I'll just have something happen, and I'll start laughing, and I can like literally not hear her voice, but it's like an energetic memory of something we've done together that is coming back to present. Things along those lines that just, it's that beauty, that reminder, that teaching, that experience that can still come through, even though someone's physicality is not still there.
She's Kathryn Henry. The book, A Dime to Say I Love You, A Journey of Love, Loss, and Spiritual Awakening, is available now. Kathryn, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe. It was a pleasure talking with you.
And that's going to do it for this episode. If you want to find out more information about Kathryn and our other amazing authors, go to theauthoritycompany.com.